Madam, voice is not audible, madam.
Is it audible, sir, now?
Now it is audible, madam.
Okay.
Now
Okay. A very good evening to all the members who have registered for this session. Myself, CA Rekha Umarship, Regional Council Member, SIRC, and the Chairperson for the Digital Accounting and Assurance Committee. I take immense pleasure in welcoming you all for this particular session on data backup and security. As I have been iterating, we had a couple of sessions, workshops, especially on Excel and Power BI, and also few physical sessions on cybersecurity, digitization of internal audit, data analytics, and Web3. So this is a must-have series of sessions for chartered accountants, out of which this is the third session. We already had 2 sessions on cloud computing and working from anywhere and anytime. So if you see post-pandemic, this particular aspect, especially data backup and security, because most of the work happens from home and it may not be through a VPN also. So most of the times we are prone to a lot of attacks. Whether it be virus, whether it be worms, trojans, malwares, or any kind of attack, spoofing, phishing, man in the middle of attack, or denial of service attack. So these things we cannot prevent after a particular point of time. And as corporates, they always go for a BCP, a business continuity planning, where the business has to be continued even during the critical times. So it is very, very mandatory that data has to be secure. And in the course of data security, there is also a backup that is happening. So today we have a speaker who is actually very, very specialized in this particular aspect of data backup and security. So I welcome Harish Venkatraman sir into this particular session. Welcome, sir. So to tell about sir, sir is a manager with risk advisory of Deloitte and has an experience of almost 5 years in the area of information technology audit. And sir is a ranker and having secured his All India 32nd rank in the CA final exams. He's also a certified information system auditor and also specializes in SOX audit, PCA OB audit, internal control over financial reporting, application process reviews, and third-party assurance engagements. He has also experience in various industries and sectors, including financial services, insurance, manufacturing, consumer technology, media, telecommunication, healthcare, automobile, IT industry, and ITS industry. And he has also aided various clients in their digital transformation journey. He has also been part of Deloitte UK and Birmingham for almost 6 months, where he was an integral part of the team that was working on PCA OB IT audits and a large-scale audit transformation programs. So I think we will not have a better speaker than Harish sir to address this particular session. We welcome once again you to this particular session, sir. The session is all yours.
All right, thank you very much, Becca, for the kind introduction. And before we begin, I would like to thank the Institute being my alma mater. I would like to thank the current chairman, Mr. Chinnamastan, and also Sri Rekha Umarship. I think you're the program coordinator for all the CP events, and the secretary, Mr. Naresh, as well. So thank you for providing the platform. Being a chartered accountant and having to present in the CA Institute as part of the SIRC of ICAI gives me an immense pleasure, and it's a great honor to be part of this. And as you rightly said, data backup and security is a very important aspect, right? Just now, I think many of you would have been admitted late by a minute or two into this meeting, and that is the reason, because my laptop has just crashed, and I was on my way back, and I've taken another laptop, transferred the presentation onto this to begin with this, and that is why you might sometimes see me sound nervous. That's because all of these things are going in the background, and I'm just staring at a dead laptop in front of me. But having said that, I think that also reiterates the need for a good data backup, right? What is it? So the program objective for today's session is actually fourfold, right? Where we talk about, one is the data backup as a need. What are the different concepts of data backup? Why is it still relevant? And what are the different strategies one can adopt as an organization? We will also be looking at certain strategies that an individual, a practicing firm from the chartered accountant's perspective could adopt. And second is on the data restore. Restore backup is not complete if we don't have the capability to restore the backups. So we will be looking at walking through certain key principles of data restoration and also the concepts and principles of data restoration. And while we do all of these, we will also be running through some recent case studies on recent incidents that has taken place that one reiterates the need for data backup. Reiterates the need of security in the data backup, and why is restoration. All of these are very important. All of these case studies that has happened over the past 12 or 18 months, as recent as the one that took place 10 days ago, right? And lastly, we would also be touching upon the data backup security. How does the backup happen in the cloud? What are the different security aspects that we need to look into from the data backup point of view, right? So moving on, right? Before we even jump into data backup, right, we must appreciate the enormous amount of data that we as organizations, probably deal with day in and day out, right? So data is becoming the new perimeter. The organizations are now being measured by the amount of data that they have, amount of data that an organization possesses, that they become a data-rich entity. Right? The quality or the size of entity is now becoming to be tending to be measured by the quantity or amount of data that people deal with, the organizations deal with. Rather more points the importance of data security measures that needs to be in place, and we are seeing huge number of regulations coming in from different parts of the globe, right? Many countries started imposing certain data privacy, data security frameworks, regulations. So you can see India is also on the data protection bill. All of these warrants that is reiterating or reinforcing the fact that data is fundamental to the business. Without data, the business cannot function, and that calls in for a robust resilience program. As part of the global resilience, or as part of the data resilience, is where data backup is the fundamental fulcrum of this resilience program of any organization. As you can see on this slide, certain surveys, certain results of it are being populated, right? Where data doubles in every 2 years, which is almost not existent a decade back, right? All of this warrants and stresses the need for a good data backup, right? And looking at certain scenario, right? As I was talking 18 months back, one of the major cloud service provider in France underwent a massive fire outbreak in one of the data centers. What happened is what resulted because of this is it has resulted in loss of millions and millions of data, millions and millions of customers' data, including certain governmental data, so including certain firms and enterprises who are solely dependent on this cloud service provider. And what could have been the reason? What is something that needed to be prevented is something we will be covering in the upcoming slides or throughout the session. What really happened is I would say this is an eye-opener for everybody, right? This OVH is the cloud service provider, and as of 2019 or 2020, this cloud service provider is the largest by way of physical data center measure. This was the largest in the world, right? And all of this is just causing the need for us to look into data backup, right? Before we jump into how an organization could prevent, right? It becomes very important that we understand the basics, right? One is, let us go through the basics of what are the different data backups. While we run through it, we will also touch upon how good or how effective an organization should carve out their data backup management strategies and plans, and how to secure and strategize all of this. What is the importance of data backup, right? As we were talking in the previous slide, data loss could occur from any of these scenarios, right? Starting from database migration, right? I'm moving from one application to the other. I might forget, or I might miss out to copy, or I might miss out to migrate certain set of tables at all. Say, for example, I have a customer master. I could not end up migrating certain customer master to it. So that results in a data loss. Software corruption, a classic case of software corruption, could lead to a data loss for an entity. Local disaster, as we were just looking at the previous slide, what could happen from the result of a local disaster, maybe a fire, a riot, vandalism, it could be anything. It could range between anything, right? All these could result in a data loss, which warrants the need for data backup. Then classic case of ransomware attack. While we have separate slides to cover how exactly ransomware attack happens and what is its correlation to the data backup, it becomes all the more important, especially in this, especially the post-pandemic time, right? I wouldn't call this a post-pandemic, ongoing, right? Especially after the COVID times come into place. The ransomware attack has been on ever increasing, and it has become very, very important for everybody to look at the good backup option, right? And hard drive failure is a classic case where just now my other laptop has died, right? A hard drive failure could happen, and that would be the primary cause of any data backup or any data loss that could happen at the personal level. Also, at even my personal laptop could crash, and what happens to my data that has in the personal laptop, right? And theft again is a loss, and human error. So for human error also, we would be coming across a very interesting case study that happened a few days back that caused a massive outreach, massive public outages in the aviation segment. So what could happen? So data loss could occur from any of these aspects, right? It is not just a data loss could occur either from a cyber attack or anything. It could we should be open to look at the data loss from this whole gamut of data perspective. So that warrants or that reiterates the need for having a good and robust data backup plan. Now, what is a data backup? What are the different, okay, now that we have spoken about why I need a data backup, we have spoken about what could be the impact at a very high level. Now, what is a good data backup? What are the different types of data backup? As you all might be aware, right, we would have a full backup, incremental, differential, although there is also another mirror backup, which we will touch upon in the later stage. So all these backup techniques have been evolving right from the way that, right from the times that the data has been evolving. When there were lesser amount of data, when there were lower volumes of data, a full backup was pretty much easier for any organizations to carry. And then came the concepts of incremental and differential backups that has evolved over the time, that reduces or helps the organization in reducing the time taken for the backup. It's considerations on storage cost, the carrying cost of all of these storage devices, all of these, right? With that, we will look at what is a full backup. A full backup, as you might know, is a complete set of entire data set that is being backed up on a continuous basis. Although this might seem easier on papers, right? It becomes more difficult for the management or an entity to back up their entire data set each and every time it takes. Although the restoration, I'm just going to say, for example, today my laptop crashes or my server crashes. I'm going to take what I had probably today morning or yesterday evening, I'm going to put it inside. I'm going to restore that one, and I'm happy. It takes lesser amount of restoration time. But on the other hand, you must look at, the storage cost that you're going to continue. Say, for example, today I'm having 20 terabytes of data, and I have to have sufficient storage spaces in my environment. I should afford to spend so much amount of time to probably carry all of those backups, and it overloads the spaces and the time that it takes for each and every backup to run. Every day I'm trying to back up 20 terabyte of data, right? It's going to take 3 or 4 hours for me, and that consumes a lot of data from operational perspective. It renders close to impossible. It renders near impossibility to back up my entire data on a daily basis, right? And there comes this differential backup, where in differential backups, I take a full backup on a day 0 or a day 1, and the remaining backups on the remaining days from day 2, day 3 would be only the incremental portion from the full backup, right? This, the concept of here differential backup is similar to incremental backup, where an incremental backup, we would be looking at the incremental changes between each and every day. Not that we will be focusing on, not that we will be taking the backups from day 1. Say for example, in differential backups. So we will be taking the backup of day 1 on day 3. We'll be taking the backup of day 1 and day 2 and day 3 together and backing up on day 3. Whereas in an incremental backup, we would only be considering the change that just happened from day 2 to day 3. So in order for me to reconstruct a data in case of an incremental backup, is that I need to have a full backup. I need to have each and every day's incremental backup. Whereas in case of a differential backup, I will need the full backup, and I will only need the last differential backup date. So these are different, backup techniques or backup mechanisms that, organizations choose, to probably deploy, or it depends. The call what the organizations or entities might take here will purely depend on one, their cost, and second, the SLAs that they have defined, what are the business critical applications they have, could they afford more downtime. All of these will go into the go into a factor that the organizations will consider, and then basis which they would decide upon choosing the appropriate backup type, right? And what is, now that we have broadly and basically touched upon the data backup and what are the different mechanisms of data backup. Now let's also take into account, or let's have a look into what constitutes a good backup strategy, right? First is the management. As we were talking through, the management first have to have and develop a comprehensive backup plan, right? This starts right from what data they need to back up. So what is it that I need to back up as an organization? Is it critical that I back up each and every data that I have in the system? No, it's quietly not possible for an entity to back up each and every single data that they have. So that calls for a specific a need to document or to identify what is to be backed up, right? So it should follow a proper backup plan, and it has to have an element of effective backup management. So what is effective backup management is what is the fundamental and core of this backup, data backup and security, which we will also cover in the upcoming slides, where it becomes very important that we determine how does it back up. Who's going to monitor all of this? Whether is it going to be an automatic? What tools are we going to use it? So all of this would form under an effective backup management, putting together which would constitute a good backup strategy of an organization. And third thing comes on securing the backups. So all the more it becomes very important that not only we focus on the data security. Now that I have a cyber attack and people have an attacker has infiltrated into my organization, it's not only important that I secure my IT environment or secure my network or secure, it also becomes important that in order for me to recover from that incident, I need to have the backup. And now if my backup is not secure, then that again leads to it renders no purpose. The backup renders no purpose to what it was intended to. So it calls for all the more importance of securing the backups. The backups should be secured the way that the data is secure, right? And one is that once we have the backup handy, we just cannot sit idle and lie on it and someday wait for the system to fail and then backup will automatically come. No, it's not the way. We'll have to identify, or we'll have to periodically see whether what backup the system is taking is whether one is adequate or not, and two is whether the restoration is possible or not. There could be some missing files that would prevent my data from being restored, right? And as a fifth point, we'll also have to understand, we'll have to clearly define what is my agreed service level agreement or SLAs, right? So I can afford, this would also correlate with my business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan, where I will have to define I would have to clearly define the recovery time objective and recovery point objectives, right? Up to what point or what time can I live without the data? And all of those should be correlated to my just backup and recovery approach that the organization is going to define. I'll have that SLAs communicated and should have the disaster recovery plan well documented. And most importantly, and although this is given at the last, right, this is a continuous process throughout the entire backup and recovery strategy, is that the respective personnel, the respective database administrators or the tool should have a thorough knowledge on how these tools work, especially when we are using any external backup tools and recovery tools, right? Now, how do we develop a comprehensive comprehensive backup plan, right? Right. First, as we were discussing, what needs to be backed up, right? It is not just the data that would need. Say, for example, today my IT environment, there is a cyber attack and my system is down. I just don't need the data backup to function. I would need an alternate processing facility in its own, right? That would call for an entire computer operation setup to be, enabled, or computer operation setups to be available as a disaster recovery, right? So we need to understand what needs to be backed up, and a comprehensive backup should unnecessarily include all of these items. One is the servers that are supporting. I just don't need the data. I need this underlying servers to host the data. So all those servers, the application software, in case, if I'm going to use a software, right, in case of many users or many chartered accountants, you would be using Tally, right? What software is that backed up properly? And how are these passwords stored? So this would come in place in case of any custom or homegrown applications by our clients also, right? Where the passwords of the database, passwords of the operating system might be scattered around in case the backup is not secure. And please note that these passwords, always the Oracle database or the SAP system as well sometimes comes with the default passwords. Right, all of these should be changed, and those should be appropriately backed up along with the other files on user master records or other system users. So although sometimes we might tend to forget these components of database, and while we just might focus on the transactional data that is getting backed up, it becomes very important that we also understand, or we also point out to the management that these are also some things that you should look for, right? As chartered accountants, we might not be on a day in day out, we might not look into certain aspects of whether have you included your database password file as part of the backup plan. We might not be involved, but it becomes a very good tool for us to also engage in a conversation with the client, right? So this becomes very critical. We need to appreciate all of these for us to understand and ensure that these factors are being considered as part of the data backup. And the backup plan should be configured or should be tailored to ensure that it covers our very large database. Some database could be very large in size, considering the nature of the client. It could host multiple terabytes of data. Now, how are we going to back that entire database up? I cannot afford to have multiple. The data itself might be spread across different databases. Now, all of those cluster database, how was the management trying to handle? What is the strategy that is adopting, right? But then what is the window and schedule? I cannot have a backup and then I cannot say that the backup is configured or it's scheduled, say, for example, once in a month or once in a week, right? Considering today's environment, it becomes very critical that everybody should have a daily backup plan in place, right? So what is your appropriate backup schedule? Depending on your need and complexity of the business, what is your appropriate backup schedule and window of use? And where do I store backup? It's a classic question, right? This is where even the cloud comes into picture. I might have my own private cloud in place, or I can go and opt for some cloud storage. The Microsoft offers some plans for the small and medium enterprises as well. So am I going to use cloud? Am I going to have another database or another computer system that is purely designed and used only for the backup and maintenance purposes? Where am I going to store the data backups? And how long am I going to store the data backups, right? I cannot end up having 10 years of backups. Although I might have 10 years of data, I don't want to store all of the backups that I've taken on in the year 2010 or 2015, right? There needs to be a backup retention. It again amounts to carrying cost for an organization that they would have to invest in determining the backups and the retention of these backups, right? The backups, we might even use the native tools of a particular application. We might use their OEM tools. Some of the applications comes with their own native backup tools. We might use it, or we might use some other external tools. And we might store it online or offline, and even in some of these small and medium enterprises, they have this mechanism of backing things up physical. They could have an external hard disk, or they could have a dedicated hard drive in a computer that is isolated, that would have only the backup tapes in that case, right? So all of this should be clearly defined, and we should ensure that we are aware of all of these aspects before we advise either our clients, and also we practice it in our firms as well, right? As being a chartered accountant and being in a CA firm, it is very essential that we have all of these tools handy. We will go through some of the cases what has happened in the recent past that would warrant this, but I think the topic of data backup is not at a very high level of certain multinational companies or corporates, right? It starts from within ourselves. It starts from within the practices that we inculcate or practices that we have in our daily operations aspect itself, right? And how do we perform this backup in an effective way, right? So performing an effective backup, first of all, talking from the a mid-size or a large firm, right? One is effective backup management always goes with automatic backups. Right? We might have a job scheduler, or even for that case, the OneDrive offers a feature where we can synchronize it on a real-time basis, or we can schedule it to run on a daily basis. Right? Automating backups becomes very important, that we define the frequency, and also we review the logs in case if there is going to be any errors. Right? That calls for the second one, monitoring the backups. So say, for example, I have scheduled a backup on a daily basis, and say, for example, it fails, it has failed on today, right? Today evening at 5 o'clock, the backup has failed. And how do I know in case if there is no communication or alert mechanism that generates and states that your backup has failed on this particular date? I would not know. And tomorrow, if my system crashes, and then later on I find out that I don't have a backup because the backup has failed, then that causes that puts a black mark on in the entire backup strategy itself, right? So monitoring of backups becomes very important, and maintenance of backups also, right? How long are we going to maintain it, and validating backups. So validating backups is not equivalent to restore backups, but without a restoration of backup, right? How are we validating that a backup is probably readable? So all of these have to be taken place. All of these have to be considered in order for us to establish an effective data backup management process, right? Considerations for how do we consider? So there is a key concept here: grandfather, father, son, as you might see in a graphical illustration below, right? So grandfather, father, son is normally a terminology, a phrase that is used to represent three copies of a backup, right? One is the grandfather backup that is stored on a monthly once basis, right? It will be taken on a monthly basis. It will be put across in an offsite. It will be stored there. It'll not be touched upon, right? And then I have a weekly full backup, right? And this is the father, and this son is going to be backed up on a daily basis. So all these, say, for example, there are 7 days in a week, and the father has 6 sons, right? All of these 6 sons have to be put together in order to derive, or it has to be put together, combined with the father, in order to deduce the data back to what was the original data backup, the original data, right? And all of these father, right? It is the grandfather is the ultimate backup, right? In order for us to have a complete backup, which is being stored at the end of the month in a different location or in a different media for the safety and security of the backup. So this concept of grandfather, father, son becomes very important. We will also talk about one other rule or a thumb rule or a principle, like 3-to-1 rule, that is normally goes in for in case of a backup strategy, right? So this concept is like a thumb rule that we need to ensure, or that we need to understand and emphasize when we're talking to clients, right? Whether they have these backups in hand, right? The incremental backups on a daily basis is a must. So we have a daily backup plan, and all of these backups, in order for me to restore, I need to have a weekly full backup. So therefore, at any point of time, I will only lose a week's data in the worst case scenario I'm saying, right? So this weekly backup and a daily backup, and together with the monthly backup, formulates the entire thumb rule of grandfather, father, and son, right? And although we might have this grandfather, father, son, the 3-to-1 rules, all of this, right? With the amount of data that we have been coming across in the recent years, as we grow along, right? Data is ever growing. You've seen the first few slides. It becomes very important that data catalog is being maintained. Now, what do we know, right? In case I want to restore data, and I have the option to restore, I'm going to club all of these incremental backups to the full backup to restore data. But that is not it. That will again take some time for us to restore. What cataloging does is, in case of large data sets, in the case of large databases, cataloging is a metadata. It has the data about your data, where, in which file does your data backup have, and what is the current listing of files that is current and live in your system, right? All of these are stored in the data catalog. Our data catalog contains the information on when was your last version of the file, where is it located, which are your current versions of the file, and therefore, in case of any restoration, the data catalog helps in pulling out the respective data and then helps you in restoration, right? Now let's look at an example here. I mean, this is just again trying to quote it through an example here, where we have, say, for example, 4 files and you add a file or delete a file, right? Data catalog would maintain the exact inventory of this and let you know what is, what exactly needs to be backed up, or what exactly is the current file that needs to be backed up, and what are the different files that need to be backed up. And it helps you to catalog and inventory the entire data sets that you have that would cause for an effective data backup. So although this data cataloging, data synthesizers, all of these are coming as part of the latest new tools, right? All these might not be, cost effective for any, small and medium enterprises, right? So what is it that these entities can do in case of, backing up of certain data? One thing is, first, for any of the small and medium enterprises, right? First, we need to understand the importance of a data backup, because the ransomware attackers or the cyber attackers are not going to differentiate between, okay, this is a large customer, this is a personal laptop user, or this is a large customer, right? It's all part of a great phishing campaign, I would even say, where if you click on an unwanted link or a file, right, that renders your entire computer unreadable. So all of this, none of us are excused from any of these ransomware attacks, right? So this, as a part of the small and medium enterprise, first, you should understand that it is all the more important that we understand and appreciate that, okay, first we need a data backup. Well, first we need to back up what we have, right? So once we appreciate the fact, right, there are multiple tools that are available online, that are available at a very nominal subscription cost. I'm talking about the cloud solutions here, right from Microsoft Cloud Solutions or Google Cloud Solution, which can be integrated to our systems, right? What are the systems that are going to be backed up, and how are you going to back up? Say, for example, I'm going for an example on a cloud solution here. You pay, say, for example, an annual 5,000 or 7,000 rupees annually that would help you back up 5 or 10 devices that would provide you licensed version of all of this, right? So that is an effective tool, right? There are open source, there are subscription models available from reputed software companies like Microsoft, like Google, other things. So it is very important that we appreciate this, make use of these available tools and measures to ensure that we have these, we have the data security at the heart of our business, right? And talking as we, right, what is the data basic hygiene for a data backup? Is just to summarize what we discussed. It has 3 elements. First, what data to back up. This, be it for any organization of any size, be it a multinational company or a conglomerate, or be it a small and a medium enterprise, or even for a matter, my personal devices, right? What is to be backed up? I don't want the entire data to be backed up, but I have to define what needs to be backed up. Where should I back up? Is it that I'm going to connect my phone to a computer on a daily basis or on a weekly basis to transfer all of the data from my phone to my computer to have a backup? So where am I going to back up? And how do I back up, right? How to back up the data? So all of these are fundamentals of my business, of the data backup, that everybody should revisit, understand these 3 aspects: what to back up, where to back up, and how to back up. So these 3 questions are something that everybody needs to answer basis their cost, basis their complexity of the business, basis the amount of, the basis their IT environment as well. What are the common challenges, right? We have spoken much about all of these data backup strategies and all the other aspects. Now, what are the backup concerns? Now, these are some genuine concerns that we have come across on a very, on a periodical, on a regular basis across different, entities that we look at. One is, primary thing is data corruption, right? In case some files are being unreadable, or, the system has gone down because there is a missing configuration file, right? So that renders my entire system or my backup device, it's gone. My data is gone, right? So this would also ensure that my backup is secure. And what happens in case of data corruption in my backup also? It becomes very important that my data be secured, and also my backups also are secured, and there are no possibilities of corruption. Or I might have redundant data sets in the same hard disk, right? There are latest hard disks that are coming that would help you in preventing all of these data corruption issues that are happening. And the next one is incomplete backup, right? Say for example, I, as an organization, I might have 20 systems or 30 systems that I'm using, right? I might miss to configure the backup or enable the backup in say a couple of systems, right? Then all my data all the user data, all the transactional data would not be backed up in my system. Or say, for example, from the application perspective, right? I might not say an application is running on say 10 different servers. I might end up not configuring the backup for 1 or 2 servers over there. Now, this calls for an incomplete backup, right? How do I ensure that the backup is complete and it covers all of the intended data that I would want to do? And next common concern or next common challenge is that data storage capability. Although I might want, as an organization, I might want to back up each and everything, I will not have the capability to store that backup data. I would want to invest on external hard disks. Again, that external hard disk is prone to data corruption, as we have seen. So I might want to invest in a cloud service provider who is going to provide me all of these data backup and data restoration facilities, right? This calls for an increase in costs as well while we look at the data storage capabilities, right? And this point on data storage will necessarily mean that we don't need to store all the backups. We'll only have to have what is relevant for us. Probably we might have backup of the past 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, right? Not the entire 15 years of backup data. Although we might have 15 years of transactional data, I'm talking about the backup data, right? We don't need to maintain the backups that I've taken in the year 2005, 2010. Right? So what then? This is a slow backup, right? Normally, when we try to back up our systems, right, back up our systems or back up our applications or servers, right, it might tend to be a bit slower because they are processed during the day, during the office hours, right? So it is always recommended that as a practice, we back it up early in the morning, midnight, where it's not, or after the office hours, probably around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, where someone would be there to monitor that particular backup operation. So in case if the backup fails, somebody would be able to remediate or resolve that failure and backup to ensure that it is successful. Because the problem that happens here is, in case I'm going to run the backup on a production day, on a business hours, right? Then that would render one, my application be slow, and second is it would consume a lot of memory that would impact my operations being run smoothly, right? And the last challenge and a very common concern is the failure to even start the backup. Sometimes the systems, in case we are using any automated systems would have tried to trigger the backup to start, and then that would result, there would have been an unforeseen error to start the backup, because of which the program would not have been executed. And again, this calls for a better data backup and monitoring aspect as such, right? Now, what we have covered so far in the past 35 to 40 minutes is that we have looked at why do we need data backup on the first hand, and what are the different data backups and data backup concepts, right? While we have also touched upon the grandfather, father, son, while there is also a great grandfather, which is done on a yearly basis, right? It's too much of an overkill at some times. But we have also run through certain challenges that we have in our backup. Right? While we run through all of this, right, it becomes very important that we secure our backup. So this is where all of the effort might go in vain, even though we have a sound and robust backup. Right? Going back to the previous slide on what we started with, right, where the CVH, the French data center was hacked or underwent a massive fire outbreak. Right? What happened is that there was a the result impact is that many of the users, many of the entities' data was gone because they entirely relied on this cloud service provider. And what as a customer or what as an entity that we believe is that whatever is in cloud is safe. If I'm going to upload some data in Microsoft, my personal phone, I might upload some phone on Apple iCloud, I might use some of the Microsoft OneDrive, what I assume is that all those are secure. None of the data breaches, none of the data compromises or data loss would happen through that website, through that cloud service provider, right? That is the very common myth that everybody has. And this cloud service provider, which is, by the way, one of the largest in the world at that point of time, in terms of physical data center square meters, right? So in the light of this, this opens our eyes in relation to, should I even trust the cloud service provider, or what is the backup for my cloud service provider? I might have uploaded some of my data I might have my system running on premise, I might have uploaded some data to the cloud, but is it good enough? Is it good enough that I have the data on the cloud, right? So what has happened in this particular case is that both the customer, the cloud service partner provider here actually faced a very difficult challenge, because both their copies of the recovery were stored in the same location. That is the very fundamental of a data backup. And unfortunately, this unfortunate incident has exposed this very basic error at a massive scale, right? So this actually calls for the need that we need to stay aware of the cloud service providers and use secure storage, right? If certain backups are stored on site, what happens in case of a fire? Sometimes, I might imagine during a COVID period, right, where people are not allowed to go outside their homes. What happens in case if my backup is stored on site? I don't have access to data. I'm not allowed to travel outside, right? So all of these are calling for a need for a robust backup and security of the backup as such. And it is a very fundamental idea, or very fundamental concept. Now that we have seen this example also, it's a very fundamental concept that we ensure our backup location is different from the entity's primary backup location, right? So this is a very important aspect. Sometimes there is also an element when we are backing up to the cloud, right? Both of these entities would have access, and that also increases on the cloud. So we will come to the backing up in the cloud on a separate slide going forward, because backup in the cloud is something that's a very important aspect that is coming up, in the recent days, right? Whether is the backup in the cloud good, or whether is it secure enough? Is it safe enough that we have our backup in the cloud, right? Now, what are the different things that we need to ensure, that we need to consider to ensure that our backups are secure enough, right? So security of the backup is as important as the backup itself. That's how I would put it, right? Because without the appropriate security of the backup, I might have backup data that is very well backed up. I might do even twice a day backup. I might take one backup in the morning, one backup in the evening. But the problem is, my backup has also got corrupted along with my issue in the system. Now, how do I ensure that? Or say, for example, somebody has tampered with my data, or somebody would have downloaded my backup data and probably sold it to other people, right? All of these are calling for securing our backup. So it is not only essential that we back up our data, but it is also essential that we secure our backed up data. Right? One is a very fundamental thing on disk encryption. Right? Many of our systems, in case of any users in a large scale, organizations or anything, you might use a disk encryption. You might use, nowadays, a lot of the backup hard disk comes with an inbuilt disk encryption, be it Western Digital's or be it Samsung's disk. Right? It comes with an inbuilt disk encryption. Right? It is therefore highly recommended that we use such models of hard disks that support this kind of a feature, where a full disk encryption, what they call as an FDE, is supportive, right? So without the PIN, the data cannot be, even though it's backed up, it cannot be downloaded or it cannot be used for other restoration. And second is storage of backed up data. Where do we store it? And encryption of the file. Now, although we might have our disk encrypted, right? Say, for example, somebody within my organization. So disk encryption works for an external threat actor, wherein somebody from an external organization tries to access my data or tries to sabotage or take away my hard disk and try to connect his own and try to copy the data. That would work. But what if somebody from internal tries to, probably encrypt the data or try to access the data, right? So therefore the encryption part comes into play. It becomes very important that in case, say for example, we are using a backup tool, right? Even I've seen some native backup devices, some backup devices that are private, that acts like a private cloud, has this option to enable encryption for the backup. So it'll just be a tool or checkbox kind of thing where we need to ensure that we are encrypting the backup. Say for example, a classic case, when we're trying to back up our phone, be it a Samsung or an Apple phone to our laptop, it would pop up an option that you want to encrypt this backup or not, right? So it is very fundamental. So all of these concepts are not something that is applicable only to high-end sophisticated entities or sophisticated tools, right? It is there as part of our daily day-to-day backup management tool as well. So all of this encryption of backup should be ideally taken care. It should be used, or it should be put into use in an effective way, right? Where we are first of all aware of it and make sure that we encrypt the backup file. And third is the access to backup. Now, who would have access to backup? Normally, the database administrators or the information technology team who's looking at all of these backup, who's responsible for taking the backup, maintaining the hard disks and all the other things, or are going to be responsible, right? Outside of these, if somebody else is going to have access to the backup, then it causes a greater concern. There could be a potential sabotage. There could be a potential unauthorized use of the backed up data, right? That is something that we should ensure as an organization. So in case of all of these concepts, again, just to reiterate, all of these concepts are not only for large conglomerates. As a practicing chartered accountant firm, it is all of these should be understood from that level, from that aspect as well, because these are very basic aspects that we can probably practice in our own firm to ensure that these backups are secured appropriately. Next is intrusion detection mechanism. In case we have a backup server separately that is located at a place, right? We have to ensure that there are no unauthorized intrusions into the backup server and ensure that the backup servers are adequately protected. So we should have such backup intrusion mechanisms built, intrusion detection systems or intrusion prevention systems, what we normally call as an IPS or IDS. So all of those needs to be built in to ensure that there are no unauthorized access or into the backup, right? And lastly, this is a very interesting point on ensuring the security of the backed up data. This might be practiced by some of the huge big MNCs and conglomerates where data is the sole business of them, right? So dark web monitoring, is there any compromised credentials or compromised sensitive data that is pertaining to the entity and their customers or private to their entity, right? Is any of such data been available in the dark web, right? So this becomes a very interesting analysis. We have also had a few instances where some data was, say, for example, we would be talking in a timeline in a coming slide where one of the companies had faced a cyber attack due to which certain data was compromised on the dark web, and data backup was used to restore. So we will be talking about it, but it becomes very important that we monitor, not from this chartered accountants perspective. We emphasize in case some of our clients are data centric. They depend on certain data analytics and data centric clients where data is a very key to the functioning of the clients. It becomes very important that we recommend talk to them on these lines to understand, make them aware that all this could be a potential eye opener for them. Right? This could be something that they were not aware of earlier. This could be something that that you can strike a conversation with somebody, right? And lastly is consideration is backing up certain configuration files. So we will also talk about this in the next couple of slides as to what happened in case of another incident. But it becomes very important without the underlying configuration files, right? I might have a network device. I should also ensure that my network devices and their configurations are being backed up on a periodical basis. Although this might apply to a large entity, but it is, we should ensure as an IS auditor, wearing the lens of an IS auditor, one should ensure that the certain configuration files, certain network devices, if you're going to talk about it, those devices are being backed up on an appropriate basis or not. It's not just the data backup, but also the backup of the configuration files as such. Right now, let's having done through all of this, right? Let us quickly jump on to a recent incident that took place a week back or 10 days back, right? And I'm just going to pause here, right? That what has happened here is, let me just read through this. What has happened is, this is a result, or this is a public announcement on January 19th of 2023 by the Federal Aviation Administration of the United States government, wherein they had determined, so what has happened is that they have a system called notice to air missions, right, that controls all the flight traffic, that helps in controlling all the flight traffic. And all of a sudden, this NOTAM was down, and none of them were aware of how it happened. What happened because of this is, people would have thought that this would have been recovered in 5 or 10 minutes, that it was not available, which effectively means that in case of any flight that is flying on top, they don't have any information on the air traffic, which causes a huge national security threat to the United States government. And we all know how the US government is paranoid about this air traffic and security post the 2001 incident on the Twin Towers, right? So all of this, once the system was down and everybody feared a cyber attack, or everybody feared a ransomware attack, because of which they are unable to access the system and all of this. But what had happened actually, as per their public notice, is that the contract personnel who is supporting the IT administration guy, poor guy, unintentionally deleted certain files that was working to correct the synchronization between the primary database and the backup database. So when he was trying to do this between your primary and the backup, which essentially rendered their backup also unreadable, therefore they were not able to go in for restoration, right, on a timely basis. So this was a very small mistake, or a configuration file that was just probably deleted by some poor guy, that had led to such a massive public outage. What is the result of this? It was about 32,000 odd flights were delayed, and certain 400, 500 flights were also cancelled in and out of the country. Right. This was the first incident after the Twin Towers incident where the US flights were grounded for a longer duration of time. So all of this might, sound a very bit, tricky, but the essence or fundamental of this is driving into two things that we have just covered upon recently. What is the learning that we did that was missing probably, or what is it the takeaway that we need to probably appreciate and understand in this incident? Is that one is testing the recovery times in case something goes wrong. How frequently or how quickly can I recover from that incident? Testing recovery is becoming a very important part of your digital hygiene. It's very important to render continuous supply of services to the customers. In this case, it was a massive scale operation and massive scale outage that was at unprecedented levels, right? And then logical corruption of the databases. What could happen here is that basis the CISA, so CISA is again a wing of US government. I'm not referring to the CISA of the ISAC, right? What happened is CISA had recommended them to use high availability clusters. So what is a high availability cluster? Is nothing but using of, in case of mission very highly critical and very important systems. It becomes usage of these high availability cluster will ensure that even if couple of levels of layers fail, the system would still continue to run and ensure that there are no single point of failure, right? But the more important thing is the very basic hygiene of testing our recovery systems in place, right? So that is this cautions probably the need, probably very important need of the usage of backup sound, probably appropriate backup and recovery system, right? This also draws us to one more concept and one more rule, right? Earlier we were seeing one rule called grandfather, father, son, right? We're also going to look into one other aspect or one other technique of data backup, which is 3-to-1 rule, right? In such cases, what is the general global practice is that there should be 3 copies of the versions of the data, right? Which should be stored on 2 different pieces of media, one of which is offsite, right? So this is the 3-to-1 rule, wherein 3 copies of data, 2 different places, 1 is offsite, right? So what essentially means here is that, although there are there are huge data sets and other things. We ensure that we have the live transactional data, the immediate backup, which is the incremental backup that we might take, and then there will be a full backup, and then there will be a complete backup that is being taken and stored in an offsite location. So in case my backup fails, there are three backed data. In case my backup fails in the system, I'm unable to reconstruct this backup data would also be stored in an offsite, which would be my disaster recovery point, disaster recovery place, wherein I can ensure that that particular data is also readable. Therefore, even though my location, this particular first backup data fails, I would have another backup data that is going to support me. Or say, for example, in case if Chennai is having some floods, right, there will be another location, Mumbai or Hyderabad, that is going to probably pitch in and help me to recover my data, because Chennai is suffering with flood. I cannot store both of my backups in the same location, one in Paris and one in somewhere near Thambaram, right? I cannot afford to do that mistake here. So the 3-to-1 rule again is a thumb rule that one should ensure that one should essentially practice. See, all of these are, as a CA firm, right? All of these would not directly impact our financial auditing or financial reporting or tax considerations, right? But what it helps us to do is, say, for example, our clients is, you can strike a conversation with them to try and understand just the pulse of your client. I'm going to repeat this again because it becomes very important that we have a good backup plan, right? It becomes a very good talking point to our client to understand their pulse on all of these matters. Some of them are not aware of any of these aspects. They don't need to have a cloud service provider. They don't need to have a sophisticated backup tool, right? But the basic hygiene or basic knowledge on this good backup mechanisms should be in place. And whenever when we are going to wear the lens of an IS auditor, it becomes very important that we appreciate all of these. We suggest robust and good practices that is being followed globally across the nations, right? Now that we have spoken much about all of these backups, now we are coming to the point on where do I need to backup, right? So we assume that we have seen a couple of incidents also. We assume that a backup in a cloud is a secure option, because whenever we backup, right, whatever is in cloud, there's a common myth that whatever is in cloud is good and secure. But what could happen to our backup methodology or backup strategy in case something goes wrong to our cloud database also? So we should first of all understand that clouds also fail. Although Microsoft might come up and say they assure you 99.999% of availability because they are robust. We don't argue that they don't have a state-of-the-art infrastructure, right? All of these cloud service providers do have a state-of-the-art infrastructure that is very almost near to impossible to penetrate by a common hacker. But there are still ways that a cyber attack could happen, either from internal or from external. Now, when we are going to be heavily dependent on all of these cloud service providers, this is actually double-edged sword, right? One is that we are happy that we are offloading certain things to them, in which case, we are happy, right? It goes off our shoulders because the data. I don't need to invest. I don't need to have an IT team that large for which I'm going to manage all of the network cables and other things to ensure that I'm going to save on all of those costs. But on the other hand, we should also realize that those cloud service providers will have access to your data, right? Although I might happily use on my personal phone all of these Google Drives, Apple Drives, iCloud Drives, right? But I should also understand that in case I'm going to store a video or a photo or a document on my Google Drive, it is not that it is only accessible to me. Even the Google counterparts, whoever has the server access, will definitely have access to the file that I have uploaded to the particular OneDrive, right? Google Drive. That is something that we should first of all understand and then appreciate that, okay, although I have uploaded certain data, it is not only me. If any data breach is going to occur at their end, say, for example, there is a disgruntled employee at their end who just wants to, sabotage the system before he leaves. Probably he has the worst boss in him, and then who just wants to give a nightmare of that, and because of which he sabotages all this data. He tries to access the servers, downloads, and it's not going to take time. Say it's not. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's near to impossibility for a person to navigate to the server, download, and say. It's very much possible from the cloud service provider's angle. It is very much possible that they have access to your data. They will definitely have access to your data, and they have the possibility of data breach at their end. Because of which, this is the reason that many of these cloud service providers are going in for certain external framework assessments, right? NIST has come, National Institute of Standards and Technology of the United States, has come up with robust, security standards, that security frameworks and security standards that needs to be in place. And then on the other hand, we have various Cloud Security Alliance CCM framework, that is CCM matrix, right? Cloud Control Matrix is put in place to ensure that organizations adhere to it. In addition to all of this, although there are other frameworks, like there are ISO standards, there are various frameworks that helps organizations to ensure that they have adequate cloud security. Right? We should ensure and appreciate that not all of these clouds could fail at any point of time. Not all of these clouds are secure enough. These could fail at any point of time, and we should ensure that we don't have a dependency on it. Right? What are the common pitfalls in this? One is that we are too much dependent on one cloud service provider. Today, I'm using Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Cloud Service Provider. I'm too much dependent on Microsoft. Or if I'm using Amazon, or if I'm using Google, I'm too much dependent on them. On one fine day, when, say, for example, today you have an annual return filing date, or you have a board meeting where you want to access certain of data, and all of a sudden Google is down in India. Right? We have seen instances where our Instagrams were down, or Facebooks or WhatsApps were down, right? It is not impossible that these cloud services platforms, cloud service providers will be up all the time. Right? That is a very common myth that should be busted. It is not that way. All of these entities, all of these CSPs also tend to fail. So we should ensure that there is no single point of failure with one particular cloud service provider. We will touch upon this topic again after we complete the rest of the remaining points. What could, although it is not entirely relevant to data backup, right? What could ensure that we stay relevant or we stay resilient even when a CSP fails, right? And even in the cloud, when we try to back up some data in the cloud, we ignore encryptions because we are under the assumption that it's in the cloud. Nobody will have access. They have to enter my username, password, which I'm not going to give to anybody, and therefore encryption is something that is taken care by the cloud service provider. No, that is not the case. We should ensure that our encryption methods, our backups are secured enough even when it is in the cloud. Right? Remember, again, a data breach at their end could mean havoc for us. Right? We cannot afford, or we cannot afford to pay for what they have, what they are. They could have missed a very basic thing. Right? And nextly, poor backup schedules. Again, this is what happens with us is the moment we go into cloud, we go into some cloud solution. So when I'm saying cloud, right, it also means for small enterprises where we are trying to use Google, Microsoft, and another platform. When we are trying to use this, we tend to forget the backup schedules on a periodical basis, right? It could be poor. We could think that it is in the cloud, it will be backed up real time, which should not be the case unless. It would mean that unless you open that application, click on run, it would not run, or it would not get synced to your website, or it would not sync to your accounts online storage, right? All of this calls for a poor backup schedule. We should ensure that whatever mechanisms that we put in place for in-person or on-premise data backup solution should be in place for the cloud as well. And lastly is the testing and monitoring of backups. Here again, we have a common myth that these backups, once it's taken and stored in cloud, they are automatically readable, right? But that is not the case. We should also ensure that this also follows a routine process of backup and restoration. Right? So these are certain things what could go wrong in case we are going to, or what rather we could oversee certain things in case we are going to back up our data on the cloud. Now, coming back to dependency on single point of failure, right? That's actually an interesting pointer on single point of failure with one of the cloud service provider. The reason is we have had multiple instances where even in the last year, the service now was down, which impacted so many customers, right? On all the service now running on AWS. Now, what it means is that these cloud applications, these SaaS platforms, these PaaS platforms, right? All of these could, first is they could go wrong, and second is we should not have the dependency. Now, it's easier to say that we should not have a dependency on one, but how do we have another? Say, I cannot manage one Google on one hand, Amazon on one hand, and Microsoft on one hand, right? It becomes very impossible, very much difficult for me to manage, for an organization to ensure that multiple cloud service partners or cloud service providers are being handled, right? I could have a different backup plan, different options here, different options there. So what is happening is slowly organizations begin to realize that a single point of failure could occur because their entire database, some banks, some large banks, home finances have their database on the cloud. They begin to realize that these data are prone to malfunction. In case certain banks have their data unreadable or or not available to customers. You saw what we all saw what HDFC went through, right? So all of these are eye openers for us to ensure that there are no single point of failures now. Because of this growing need on cloud security, there are various tools, there are various cloud security and monitoring plans that encompasses all your clouds. That it is like an SIEM, right? We are all aware or heard of the term SIEM, which basically ensures or monitors all our devices, network devices. It collates the logs, it monitors the application access, it monitors the firewall changes, all of this, right? It reads data from each and every application, collates it, provides it in a single dashboard. And similarly for cloud solutions also, now solutions have started to come up that is going to help you in monitoring your Microsoft Azure, what is the tenants, what are the services that are running on all of these servers. On one hand, it will also help you to manage your Amazon and Azure on the other hand, or also Google, right? So it will help you to monitor together all of these platforms. So solutions are coming in the market for around all of these areas and aspects on the cloud service provider. So the point I'm trying to highlight here is that single point of failure. Now, I cannot have all of my data residing in Azure, say in Amazon or in Microsoft, and ensure and take backup only in Microsoft, right? If both my transactional data and my backup data is in a single cloud service provider, that causes a havoc. In case of downtime of any of that, that would mean no business to us, right? So in case we are using as a small enterprise, or as a CA firm, right? In case we are going to use, say, Azure, Microsoft product, because it comes with Office suite of applications, other things. In case we are going to use Microsoft for storing all our transactional data, all of our client files, your trial balances, your tally, and all of these, you're using Microsoft OneDrive for your data storage. You can also explore an option of using, in case you're going to take a backup, you can also explore either two options. You can either do it physically, store it in a hard drive dedicated that is not connected to your Microsoft, or second is you can explore other cloud options just to store this backup, so that in case something is not readable here, the other data would be accessible there, right? Because we don't know when all of these cloud service providers would fail, for a matter, to be very honest with you, right? We have seen instances in the past where it has failed, but although they have all of these state-of-the-art security measures, there is still a single point of risk failure, right? Now that we have covered on all of these aspects on cloud, right? Right, and there is a growing need of what is the growing need of a good backup? Although we have seen all of these backup types and other things, backups continue to become more relevant for their access, right? Now, what is it that we need to consider? What is it that we need to do, or what is it that causes us to raise our eyebrows and say, okay, I need a good backup plan, right? Is one of the recent post-pandemic is the ransomware, right? So although this might more sort of relate to what do you say, a cyber security aspect, right? The threats are everywhere. these ransomware do not differentiate somebody between, as I told earlier, it still holds good. It does not differentiate between a common man who barely uses his Gmail account, or some small and medium enterprise, or a very large multinational company, right? So it does not, the attackers do not differentiate between any of these entities. These are part of common, phishing attacks that go on a daily basis. Right? The threats are everywhere. So what is actually a ransomware? It's actually a malware that tries to encrypt the device that it currently uses, and the encryption key is only known to the attacker. We will not be able to decrypt the key unless we have state-of-the-art decryption mechanisms or decryption tools with us. We will not be able to decrypt it, and the attacker would normally demand cryptocurrencies here, right? Such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, or whatever that he likes to be. He would try to extort money. It does not end there. First, he would initially ask you to transfer probably 1 Bitcoin or 0.5 Bitcoins, which amounts to like 17-20 lakhs. Once you give it, probably once he understands that you pay, then there will be more demand. This is the normal scenario in which the ransomware attack takes place, right? What happens here is first of all, they come into your system, they encrypt your emails, right? And they make your system literally unbootable for you, right? You cannot boot it through safe modes. You cannot do anything about your systems. And basically your system or your application server in which it'll be unreadable. None of it would be logically possible for you to decrypt or derive metadata. And vectors through which probably these ransomware could come in via the classic case is email, right? I've known one of my very known friend or a colleague who is the set up his practice, right? One of his article has by mistake clicked on a link that said, please download your tax state or something. And the moment he has clicked it, what has happened is the workstation was part of a work group within his own entity where he had like 4 or 5 laptops, and which the Tally was also installed. All of the data was corrupted in his system, right? And that this happened somewhere in last July, August, and that was close to September period, and the data was not there. All of the records, all of the files that were stored in his system were all gone. Right? You cannot decrypt. You don't want to pay 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs for him to just provide you with an decryption key. Well, our clients, not even pay 5% of it, right? Now that is a very important vector. Your email, all of these drive-by downloads, you're clicking your download button, you get an attachment, you try to open a PDF attachment, you try to open an Excel attachment that from an email or from a source that you don't know from where it originated. So all of this are potentially the sources. Now, what calls for is two things. One needs to be self-aware that this happens to us also. This happens to a common man also. This is not something that we just read on newspapers. The ransomware attacks are something that happens on literally anywhere on my mobile device, or I could get it somewhere, or somebody next to me could get it, right? It does not depend on the person. It does not depend on the organization. So anybody could get it. So one is the awareness that you are prone to attack. And second thing is we need to have malware protection, appropriate malware protection installed to and probably try and prevent. It's not going to eradicate the ransomware, right? But at least try and prevent or scan and then say, okay, something is suspicious here. To that extent, at least we should ensure that we are having basic things. So now what happens here? Right? What happens in case of ransomware? As we discussed, right? There are 3 options only. The first option is what is more critical about, in which most of the, I would say 75% of the people follow. Right? Restore from the backups. For this to happen, all of the things that we covered or that we touched upon from the beginning should be in place. I should have a current backup. I should have all my critical data backup in case I'm going to find something missing, and that is very critical to me. That does not make sense. I should have all of the critical data backup. I should have something on a timely backup. I cannot have some backup that was 1 month old. I should have some more recent backup, at least a day old or a day, 2 days old, right? They should happen on a continuous basis. So restore from backups is the most go-to option for any person. It's the typical response to any affected entity, right? In case if my laptop is in silo is getting affected, I could just discard it. I could change its hard disk. I could change its server. I could change its boot mechanism. I could change its operating system, and then I could just restore whatever data I had from the cloud or in other backup devices, and I could continue with my operations. Probably I will lose 1 or 2 files that I've updated in the past 1 or 2 days, right? So that is something that is a more sought after. So for this to happen, the reason why I've brought ransomware into the picture is, one is that ransomware attack is ever growing, and second is backups tend to be the only solution, if not the other solutions, if not the only solution that will help you from recovering from the ransomware attack, right? Now, I don't have a backup. Then the only option is either you pay the money, discard your system, or throw away and say, I don't even want any of the data. Or the third option, in case of large companies, what they do is ask government for help. Now, what if the government is in trouble? Now, I'm not going to answer that, right? We have seen so many cases coming up. AIMS Delhi, right? It's gone. It's a hush event, right? So we don't know what ask the government for help, right? We don't even know where these attackers are from, right? So all of these calls for a robust data backup mechanism. In case we have a good backup that I can rely on, even though my entire system goes for a toss, I can be confident enough in saying that, okay, I have backups using which I can restore the system and then I can resume my operations, right? So again, here data backup is very key, is very key and very fundamental in responding to any ransomware or any, for the matter, any cyber attack that comes into picture, right? Now here there is also one other caution that we need to take care, is that your backup security. I'm going to tie this back to the earlier discussion that we had on backup security. We also need to ensure that our backups are secured. Now that my ransomware is infected, I'm going to store my backup in the same server. My backup is also infected, and that would render completely useless backup, right? Although I might have good, robust backup plan, I might backup twice a day, nothing. Right? It's both are infected, both are encrypted. Right? It does not make sense. So all of that, calls for a good backup management where we have it as a 3-2-1 rule that I would call, right? Although I might have a latest backup using the grandfather, father, son, I might use a 3-2-1 rule to ensure that I have the latest backup and that's maintained somewhere in a different location or a different media, right? Now let us look at one of the cases that has happened recently. What is an ideal timeline of how this ransomware attack takes place, and a justification on this, whether this timeliness is good enough or not, right? Although we might have backup to, probably restore my data, how long does it take, right? I might have yesterday's backup, today I get infected, right? And I might restore yesterday's backup into the system, but how long does it take, right? That is also something. And I'm just trying to correlate here with probably the use of certain, an illustrative timeline or a case study basis my experience in the past, right? Where on January 1, right, on the eve of on the New Year date, one intruder tries to attempt access into my system through brute force, and once he gains access, probably 4 or 5 days later, what he does is he elevates himself as an administrator in the system and navigates and becomes the administrator of that system and of the network also. From there, he's jumping onto different application servers, and what he does is he basically injects the malicious software and renders the application and encrypts the data. And every time I'm trying to access the application, I would get an error saying I'm not able to access, right? Basically, it's causing an application outage. Now, this happens on January 10th. And for management to figure out something has happened, it takes a couple of days for them, because it's not very easy for them also to ensure that, okay, something is down, and it does not necessarily mean that there's a ransomware attack, right? These ransomware attackers leave certain signatures. What happens is, for 10 days it is down, and from that, during those days from January 10th or January 12th to 23rd, they try to reconstruct the servers, right? Now, here is where I would want to again touch upon the computer operations aspect, right? Now, data reconstruction, which we will cover as part of the recovery principles shortly in the next slide, is that we also need to understand the importance of computer operation. It is not just that I have a backup of my data, but I need to ensure that I have servers supporting that can ensure that my backed up data is readable. I have information processing facilities. I have the operating systems and other hard disks that are running that would enable me to host the application back live. So all of this needs to be considered. And once all of these reconstruction takes place, then the application goes live after 16 days of time. So whether is this 16-day delay, 16-day downfall or outage, is it good enough? Is it good enough, or is it acceptable? Depends. It's something that the clients need to answer. But the fundamental of this is that the organizations need to ensure that the application's backup should be appropriate, should be secured, and there should be appropriate response and recovery measures that needs to be defined and in place. Right? Not always we will be asked to invoke disaster recovery, but when we do it, it should be done in an appropriate way. Right? And it all starts small, right? All of these aspects that we have discussed so far, it all starts small, right from our usage of our personal phones, our usage of mobile devices, laptops, right from a small and medium enterprise, chartered accountant firm, to a large company, right? It all starts within oneself, where it all starts small, right? Now, what is it that we can do, that we can have in place to ensure that good backup practices are being followed at say, for example, at a CA firm, right? Now, I've known some of my friends who are in practice. I've known some of them take backups on pen drives, different hard disks. They do it on a weekly basis, or sometimes some people I've known some of my colleagues who's asking every of the all of their articles to back up their day's work in the dedicated workstation that they will have. So these are some of the practices that is being followed, right? But again, is that good enough backup? But there is a backup, but I wouldn't say that's a good enough backup, because again, when we are revisiting all these backups, that building is crashed down all of a sudden, then I don't know, there's a fire and both of the backup data and all of this is gone. And all of that should be taken care, right? Now, what you need to backup should be defined, right? You might, as a chartered accountant firm, you might have 20 people working along with you, or you might have 20 or 30 different systems, right? So that you might want to back up. Now, what you need to back up in those systems, you might, some people, as a good practice, what people do is they create a specific folder on only using which certain paths and directories have to be accessed. So all of those folders which are designated for things will be configured as part of the cloud backup solution. They might use Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive, but that solution will pick up this particular path for the backup, and only that path will be backed up. So that's I would say is a decent and a good enough practice. So these automated backup of personal and office devices for that specific critical paths and directories is very important. That we also, either one is we also follow it personally, even in our mobile phones, what is it that we are trying to back up? And secondly is that what is it in our office stations as well. And they, again, leveraging of cloud solutions and subscriptions that are easily available to any people. I'm not going to talk about Azure, I'm not going to talk about Amazon that are available for large scale entities, right? These are some subscriptions and solutions that are easily available and do not depend on single media. Again, I'm going to reiterate the same thing, right? As I cannot back up my data to a separate system that's going to reside right next to my system that I'm operating, that I'm in use, right? So that also calls for a single point of failure, or I cannot have both of my data and backup data in the same cloud, right? Let us try and avoid the single point of failure. Let us please be careful about the malicious emails or unknown sources. Let us not open any link or any hyperlinks or any files that are coming through this. And secure your workstation. As we spoke earlier, let us secure the workstations with adequate malware protection, and also ensure that it is a licensed product, and ensure that it is continuing to be monitored or scanned on a regular basis. Now, these are all some of the very basic hygiene measures that I would probably recommend that each one of us. This is not an exhaustive list, right? It all starts small. It all starts at that level, right? From there on, we need to build and ensure that we have such mechanisms in place. Right? What we should also think of the fact, what happened. How did we deal with such office? During the COVID pandemic, how did we deal with such data when when we were not able to travel to offices to access it? How did we deal with it? How did we enable working from home? How did we enable sharing of data? Right? All of these are some things or eye openers that we should realize, that we should take the learning out of it to ensure that we have a good data backup and security measures in place. Now, having discussed at length on all of these data backup, data security, and some of these cases as well, this draws us to something on recovery, right? Data recovery. Data recovery is as critical and as important as data backup, as we have discussed, right? Data, in case I'm not able to restore my data, then it becomes unreadable. Then it makes no sense for me to even have a good backup, right? So data recovery is very important. So here I'm going to talk about 4 key principles in recovery. One is defining and identifying and ranking critical application, right? This is part of the larger business continuity planning and disaster recovery plan, where as an organization, you need to identify what is it that is critical for me that I need to back up, and what are their acceptable timelines within which I would need. Some data I'm okay to even lose it for a week, right? But some data I would need it the very next day itself. So we need to identify and understand, for us to formulate this identification and ranking of critical applications. Right. So it is not only the data, but also the applications. We might use several applications on our system. We might, the clients might have some of the sophisticated clients might use SAP or Oracle or any of the business critical applications, right? Or on the other hand, they might also have some tool to monitor, vehicle movements or warehousing or onboarding and offboarding of inventory, all of this, right? So what is critical? You should help them in, as an IS auditor, one should help the client in identifying and ranking of these critical applications based on the principles and based on the impact that it is going to have, ideally on the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. What is going to be the impact on your system due to non-availability of these applications or of these data in the client system? So that is something that everybody should be very much aware of and help. As an IS auditor, you should help your clients identify and rank these critical applications and ensure that all of the critical applications are being covered as part of the BCP and the disaster recovery planning, right? And the second option, this is where I would feel that although we might have put a lot of things on paper, that this is what is the organization's response mechanism in case of any event, all of these in paper, right? We might not have communicated it properly, or we might not know who is actually doing what, right? That is where it becomes very important that we create a specific or designate some specific recovery team to that they would have certain roles and responsibilities mapped to them, that would ensure that they very well understand what they need to do and what is their role in the entire restoration operations as well. Right now, there could also always be an issue in case of backups of virtual machines, because the virtual machine backups are something are very, I would say it depends on the knowledge and the skill set of the IT team as well. But that is also something that the recovery team should be aware and ensure that all of their virtual machines and the cloud technologies are also considered for the backup, and the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined for them, right? And this is the third recovery principle that we had spoken about in the past also: provide a backup for all essential components of computer operations, right? Now, this is the most important aspect also. This is the heart of the business continuity planning and disaster recovery planning, where the essential components of bringing the business or operations back. This is the fundamental of it, right? Where we are ensuring that there is a server. I have dedicated spaces. I have dedicated setup that enables to bring my application or bring my data back. Say, for example, my system is down. I would have a fallback option or another system where I could go and use the system for restoring my backup and utilizing it. Say for example, this system is corrupted with a ransomware. And I would need a disconnected or another device where I could function, where I could continue working. I cannot wait for the ransomware to vanish on its own, right? This is at a smaller scale of computer operation, right? But on a larger scale, when you're looking at larger companies on its own, right, we should ensure that there are adequate processing facilities that are available. One is there should be a proper dedicated building, there should be electricity, they should have basic needs, you should have a furniture, all of these housing facilities should also be taken care, and that backup restoration should follow an essential, should essentially follow or be the same as good as the original version was, right? I cannot say that this is only a disaster recovery and I just cannot go without anything in it, right? So they should have a proper computer operation setup in place that would enable my recovery, right? And again, as we discussed, it is very important that the location of your backup should be different from that of your recovery site, from your primary site. Both cannot be in the near locality, both cannot be in the same region, both cannot, you say, for example, there is a natural calamity or a natural disaster, both cannot be in the same. Say, for example, I cannot have my primary site in Chennai and disaster site in Pondicherry, right? If there's going to be a storm, or if there's going to be a cyclone where there could be a huge natural disaster, right? Both could be affected on a single shot. So that is not a good ideal way. So it should be at a safe distance, a logical distance. It should be in a logically separated way also, which a normal man with a good prudence would apply for, right? And all of this cloud would again serve this as a solution, right? In case of cloud, will negate all of this, having to have a building, electricity, furniture. Having a cloud would negate all of these necessities. But again, as we discussed in the previous slide, the cloud considerations, we should understand that cloud comes with a risk. But yes, cloud helps us in addressing some of these risks at the scale, right? The last principle of a recovery is the effective testing, and this is where the FAA of US, where we were looking at one of the incident where a person accidentally deleted one file, right? We were looking at that incident, and that called for an effective testing of plan. There was no appropriate recovery testing that was effectively carried out that led to this particular disaster or a particular, I would say, outage of systems. But this calls for an effective and regular testing of plans. Normally, clients follow that, once you have a backup, right? Clients, I would spread it into two again. One is as a small and medium enterprise, you could always try and see what your backup contains. You could try and at least once in a year or once in 6 months, you can revisit your backed up data and then try to see if it's actually proper, right? And second thing is, from a large scale entity, it is very much recommended that you, as an IS auditor, that you engage with your clients to perform the disaster recovery testing or the restoration testing the recovery testing on a periodical basis. Some clients, some organizations might do it quarterly. Some people might do it half yearly, or even if they determine that all my backup is good or something, they may do it annually as well. So it calls for a regular periodical testing and ensure that your recovery measures that you have defined and put in place is appropriate, and it is very well here. The only way that we can try to ensure that what backup data that we have is by ensuring what and just putting into test our recovery systems that we have in place. Only when we test what we have backed up, we will know whether the backup is good or not. Only then a new Pandora box will be opened up where we can see things and fix it for the greater good, right? Now, having spoken about recovery, right, as similar to what we discussed for backup, let us look into some of the good practices that we can follow for recovery. Right, backups, as we said, backups are no use if the IT team cannot restore the data to the system at the time of need. If if I'm going to get some data at some point, later point of time, it is of no use, because data is all the key that in the current world, right? Data is the key. If I'm not going to get, say, for example, imagine the client system is out and they have to mandatorily file their returns before, say, by the end of May or by the end of September, and they're unable to provide the data because the system is down, right? And later on, they come back in the month of June or in the month of October to provide us with the data. It renders useless, right? I mean, it is useful. I can file the data at a later point of time, but all of those, will have a larger impact, right? We should ensure that I need the data at the right point of time. And in case my restoration takes longer, as we have seen in an earlier incident earlier, right? In case my restoration is going to take longer, or if it's an unreadable state, then my backup is not useful at all, right? Good practices. Let us follow a good database restoration testing. It's a very fundamental thing. We should at least, even as a smaller organizations, one should try and ensure that the backups are readable, and validating the restores where possible, right? Without doing the restores, I can simply look into and validate whether the backup is complete. I can monitor the status. I can see the basic hygiene check, the metadata of the file to see whether the backups are being validated. And in case of certain database, what happens is, this is a very good practice that many of the organizations do, right? In case they have an application, normally the clients have an application called production instance and non-production instance, right? Production instance is the way where all the transactions takes place, and then there will be a test system or a non-production system or a quality system, however they would want to call, right? This non-production database, what clients do is they would refresh their production database into non-production on a periodical basis, like once in a month or once in 2 months. Although this might not occur to full recovery testing or disaster recovery plan testing, right? This is a practice that they follow to ensure that their backups are readable, and also ensure that their whatever non-production database for testing purpose they're using contains the live data. This is a dual purpose, but that's a very good one of the good practices that organizations follow by refreshing their production database to a non-production instance, right? And the next point is on the response option is on performing annual restore testing from tape as part of the audit, right? Now here, as part of our audit, it is also recommended that we recommend or we maintain the log, or we review what activities that the DBAs have performed, and also perform the actual restores, and also what is the strategy to recover from in case of if there are going to be any corruptions. So these RMAN is again that's the latest version of the in Oracle. If sometimes we are using any RMAN solution, right, that can be used to repair certain corrupted blocks of the database. But all of these are some response options and good practices that we can have by performing the actual recovery itself. Now, all of this backup and recovery, how does it impact our financial audit? So as primarily as a chartered accountant, is it going to be that relevant for us for financial audit? Now, it depends. One is if the client fails to perform a backup, if the client fails to perform a restoration, will it have a direct impact on your financial reporting? No, right? But what it causes is that lack of good practice in case of any adverse event, in case the client system is down with the ransomware attack, if they're prone to a ransomware attack, right? What happens is that the entire data becoming unreadable. They don't have a good practice, and all the data gone for a toss. Organizations cannot go and reconstruct all of their vouchers and invoices right from day one, or the historical data, right? So that would have, in case of any impact, it would have a massive, colossal impact on your financial reporting aspects. And another thing that will cause is, in case of some reputed clients, it could have a reputational damage, which could also cause a decrease in a public trust, and therefore cause even a concern for your going concern basis. Right? All of these are some aspects that could be considered. Backup and recovery as such is not directly attributable to any financial audit relevance, but having a good backup and recovery ensures that you respond and recover to incidents and cyber incidents properly, and ensure that you have a robust system in place. And that would just negate, or that would just enable you to probably sort of address the concerns around non-availability of system, right? So as we said, for a financial audit, it would not be relevant. It would depend on the complexity of the IT environment and what systems they use. Simply, it would only warrant a simple low-level audit procedure, and we would not be directly concerned with more of this thing. And as an IT auditor, you would also probably testing for the backup of data, that whether they were doing it properly or not, and probably we will just end up reviewing their BCP and DR to see if they were done on a timely basis, right? That draws us to sort of, I would say, to a complete cycle on what is backup, on what are the responses that we have to develop as part of backup and recovery options, principles on recovery, and what is the relevance to the audit, right? Now, I'm just going to pause here and then take through a couple of more slides on fundamental highlighting on data security, the data management. What we have probably done is, since we're talking more about the data, it is also very important that we appreciate the data management and data management maturity models, which can be categorized across the different buckets, right? So how are organizations managing this? Right? So this is basically a management maturity, like a self-assessment that organizations can do, right from data governance. Is there somebody governing who is responsible for updating data governance process? That is from the people. Is somebody responsibility assigned to it? Are there processes for it? And what kinds of tools are we using to report or manage such data governance? And for all of these 5 buckets, right? Data governance, data architecture, data quality management, metadata management, data retention, and security. We have spoken much about data retention and data security also to an extent in case of as it pertains to data archival, backup, and restoration. But these are certain maturity models that organizations from the data point should probably try and understand. Is there a team responsible for designing and managing the data architecture? Are there standard processes for data storage? And then from people's perspective, right? One is, let me go by the people perspective. Are there a good governance body? Somebody is responsible for it. Is a responsible team for defining and managing the data architecture? Somebody who's going to ensure the quality of the data sets that are available? Who is going to be responsible for tracking all of your metadata? And who is going to manage all of your data retention, data security, and disposal of data? Right? All of these responsibilities across all of these 5 buckets should be probably assigned to. And in case of process, are there formal processes and review boards? Are there standard process for data storage? What are the processes that you have to manage your quality of data? What procedures that you have implemented to it? What are the security metrics that are being deployed to it? Right? How do you store it? And from technology perspective, it becomes very important on what are the tools, techniques, and methods that we use, right? So all of these are, kind of a self-assessment for an organization that you can probably discuss on these lines of on data maturity model. And on this, this entire data security, this data backup is only a tiny bit of part of the entire gamut of IT risk management, right? As an organization should ensure and have an end-to-end IT risk management framework, or at least if they do have a framework. I understand a lot of Indian clients are hesitant or still not that matured enough to put in place an IT risk management framework, but at least try and understand and appreciate the relevant risks that could come along when we are starting to use more and more applications. So data backup is only one part of the risk. While I quickly jump onto the data, IT risk management framework, what are the different components of it, right? It starts from the risk management to the probably end financial regulator and other reporting, right? Data backup and restoration is just one part of it in the middle, where we are trying to do as part of all the other IT and risk management framework, right? The entire gamut of risk management. So organizations could actually benchmark on, try and derive or try and understand or benchmark their practices in line with global standards. As we were talking about NIST, ISO standards, in case if they are handling some large amount of data, they could go in for high trust assessments or security alliance framework. So all of these provide, and as such, ISACA is also coming up with, has also this COVID framework, which is it's a holistic governance and control. It's not just on IT, but entire IT governance framework as such, right from the way that an evaluation of IT strategy happens till the way that it is being executed and monitored, right? So all of these are part of the robust IT management framework where we have to consider people aspect, where people would be involved. We should ensure and understand the competencies of people who are involved in the IT operations. We should ensure that they are also humans and they're prone to errors, they're prone to sabotage and other things. We should ensure from the people point of view, and all of our IT operations cannot be people dependent, right? Even when we take a backup and recovery, it cannot be people dependent. Only one person would do backup and recovery. It cannot be people dependent. It should be process dependent, right? So how do we move from people dependency to process dependency? So that calls in for to put a robust process around it, call for good practices in place, good processes in place. Even though some persons are not available, the firm would continue to run on, clients would continue to run on, right? This calls for a robust process. And what supports all of this is people and the processes, the technology aspect. Right? The technology is an enabler of all of these business operations, as we continue to read many times day in, day out, right? Technology is an enabler of business. Now, this technology would enable us for the people to follow their process in a standard and in a structured way that would enable monitoring the discrepancies, that would enable effecting some solutions on a proper basis, right? So all of these aspects should be taken care, while we appreciate our clients doing all of these good practices, it is also we should also try and ensure that the client is aware of the whole gamut of IT risk management, right? It could be a very small client, be a client in, having just, 50 crores or 40 crores or 50 crores of turnover, right? The clients could have, I should appreciate, engage in conversations, ensure that, even when they're using a tally for processing their business operations, right? We should ensure and educate that, certain good practices be followed right from the way that I'm going to procure a license, right? Till the time that, some person, is processing the entry or even deleting the entry. All of these follow a good IT risk management framework. So I think with this, I would pause here, and any questions I'm happy to take. Or any questions, probably you can put it in the Q&A box or chat box that is open.
Sir, in Q&A panel, 2 questions are there, sir. Q&A panel.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of questions that I can see. One is on the data backup for MSME. I think I covered it in the beginning when I was looking at this and emphasized on the MSME. But if there is anything in addition to it, I'm happy to answer. I think there is one question. What about designing the database for quick backup and recovery? I think it's not about, I think we're talking about a couple of aspects here. One is the designing and structuring of our database. And I think that depends solely on the way that, our applications function, right? One application could be structured in a different way to use a database, right? It also depends on the database. There are multiple open source database, there are multiple PostgreSQL, there are MongoDBs, there are other databases that are available. Whereas compared to MS SQL or Oracle structured databases, which are more also structured, right? So that one is the designing of the database would solely depend on the application that they're using, and which also has to be factored in for the backup and recovery option. So the backup and recovery depends on the complexity of the database also, right? In case if your database is going to take longer time to recover, then I think that is something that, we'll have to factor in at the time of defining the, what do we say, the frequency, the nature and extent of how we are going to back up. Yeah, I think there is one more point I have. Yeah, I think I would also agree, but probably I think I have found in my experience to split the tables between different databases, a small place to be. But yeah, I mean, that I would also agree, because in case of cluster databases also, I think even in case of very large databases, right, splitting up tables across different databases, I mean, it depends. I would say it depends, goes back to the way that your application is configured to read such data. So mix of data backup and portable hard drive and cloud on a frequent basis will be adequate data backup policy. See, it is always suggested that for our data backup, it is always suggested that we have backup on our two different media. One is on the physical media, which other is on the cloud. So yes, portable hard drive, one cloud on a frequent basis. Again, it depends on the frequency that we're talking about here and the kind of data that we're talking about here. It depends on your need, right? If you determine that I can live with the data for a week time or 10 days time, yes, you can, but the principle holds good, right? The principle that you're mixing up your data backup in your cloud on your on-premise is still a very good backup technique. See, on a small, I'm seeing a couple of questions here on the tools that can be used by the small and medium enterprises, right? As I was talking about here, there are multiple tools that are available on the market, right? One, in case of small and medium enterprises, even your basic, your Microsoft, it starts from your Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive that offers the basic data backup. If you're going to invest some more tool, right? There are other tools in the market. There are VM backup tools, or there's I mean, this Commvault is going to cost a lot of bucks. But again, these are some tools that will be so expensive. But this data backup or tools could range right from using all of these secure cloud practices. Okay, I don't think I have any further questions. If there is anything, you can probably reach out to me. I think my contact should be available somewhere on the invite, or I'm not sure. If not, I think Madan can also help in sharing it. Yeah. So thank you everyone for your patient listening. I think we are 5 minutes ahead of the schedule. I wish everyone a happy good evening. I wish you have a great week and a great year as well. Thank you everyone for your time.
So thank you for conducting the online session, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.